Carol, why did you include this one with the lot 30?
Oh, the problem is that these are complicated because they're in a development, so my abutters are. And that is just so that I could choose one piece that the developer still owned. So I
Oh,
wanted to
okay, so that's so that you could get that list of abutters.
I wanted to show, because he's the declarant.
Okay.
There's not an act, I don't know if there's an active HOA because I haven't gotten the word back. Is there an HOA active or not active? So he still owns 50-something% of the lot. So this is why you have it. These are the ones that Joe Lynch still owns.
Yeah.
He's doing business as Loon Landing Development LLC. And then the other one is so that you can see where the subject lot is, little dot in the middle.
There is a homeowners association down there.
Is it registered and active and? all
They were
that stuff?
collecting dues at one point in time, I know that, and one of the gentlemen that lived there who's an attorney was the old president.
Well, Michael
Mr.
Shepherd,
Shepherd.
but he's the one who emailed me and said. Not anymore. It's, he's the one who said. You know, Joe Lynch is the declarant,
The
he's
declarant,
working on it,
yeah, because he owns better than 50%, so under,
not a lot more now.
but see,
Like the-
under the original homeowners, covenant there, once they had either 20 houses or 20 lots sold, then it was the responsibility of the roads and upkeep of the common areas was to be turned over to the HOA. But yet, Lynch still, and that has happened, there have been 20 lots and or 20 homes sold now. So,
Well, I just want to make sure that I noticed everybody who needed or might need.
notified everybody in the world if you looked at that.
However, the other complicating thing was you have to look at the landing in one piece.
Yeah.
So you see this print with the little yellow dot in the middle, that's Mr. Beniglia's. Okay, so his abutters, it's not just the abutters around him. It's the abutters to the landing. So this bottom part here is the national forest. And then this part here, the Waldo Drive people, who's called River Edge condominiums. And then the Beechwood too.
Got Riverblade, got Beechwood too, got Loonwood,
And then,
all three of those.
yeah, they have other condos in their development. Anyway, so it's just complicated. It's not a normal abutter situation. But nothing in Lincoln is,
Ray, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
I'm mute.
You're muted. I don't know sign language. You know sign language?
Is that any better?
We hear you.
All right, do you want me to go back to muted?
Oh,
No? Okay,
You can translate to sign language for us if you like.
okay, I'll go to silent. Hey, wait, how come we didn't get our 3 feet of snow? I'm not complaining, but the skiers would have loved it.
okay, I haven't seen John come yet. He was told on more than one occasion that we're on for tonight. However, we do have 3 people physically present. You could appoint Susan to sit. And so you would have 4 members for the ZBA hearing. The applicant has the right to wait until he has a full board
I'm
if he wants.
We're good.
But
I'll make a motion then to approve Susan Shenard as a sitting member for this evening's meeting.
Okay, and then you should probably choose somebody to sit as an interim chair.
I make a motion to put Jack Jelly.
Right, Renee, you're the chairman. He can be remote chair, correct?
Is that kosher?
I think we have to have a chair sitting in here.
You do?
You can still direct.
Yeah.
So saith our leader.
I make a motion to make Jack the acting chair.
Second,
You can make Jack the acting chair and then tell him what to do.
All right. You can act as my wife, in other words. All right, then, as acting chair, thank you. I owe you. I'll call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Jack, because I just can't see what's going on, you know?
All right. First of all, we have a set of minutes from Wednesday, February 15, 2022. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve those minutes as distributed?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Meetings approved. From February 15. All right, this evening we have a
was
hearing.
this, I'm sorry, just,
Yeah,
and I know I'm a little late to that, but this was just like a month ago? Wouldn't it be 2023?
yes, mistake. That's a
Yeah,
good thing
sorry.
Susan's among us.
Good catch.
Is it catch?
What's that?
All right, this here evening's hearing is the appellant is Frank E. Maniglia and Megan Maniglia of 44 Ashwood Avenue in Wilmington or 41 Gibbs Avenue in Wareham. And representing the applicant, the appellant is Stuart Anderson from Alba Architects.
Right, and if you'll notice, I set aside, originally Phil was gonna be here. And in the past, there have been issues with, whether he's properly authorized to represent the applicant or the appellant. And Stuart is part of that architectural firm anyway, so he probably would have been fine, but just to be sure, we have also an okay from Mr. Maniglia to have Stuart represented.
Right. Let that be part of the record, dated February 1st, 2023.
Good evening, Stuart. Ray here.
Hey Ray, how are you? Good to see you. On the
I'm
screen.
well. Are we both supposed to be at another meeting right now?
I hope not.
Okay. It would be called New Hampshire Scott.
Yeah, I didn't. Is there one this evening?
Yeah,
I believe so, but you could be right.
yep,
We'll make it quick.
5:30.
Okay. And I got one tomorrow.
Okay, so, I don't know if you wanna do this, Jack, or you want me to kind of read what the situation is here? So Mr., do you wanna do this, or you want me to?
You can read it, then we can have Mr. Anderson explain.
Okay, so I'm just reading from the formal notice, and the property is 4 Hay Hill Road, which is map 132, lot 57, 56.56 acres. It's in the rural residential district. It is, the subject lot is part of the development known as the landing at Moon Mountain, part of an active HOA. Known as the landing at Moon Mountain Homeowners Association, however, it's not legally doing business as Moon Landing Development LLC is the parent and is still owner of the majority of the undeveloped lots. The applicable portion of the zoning ordinance, which is known as the land use plan ordinance. In the rural residential district, the front, side, and rear setbacks are 15 feet from the property boundary line. A retaining wall greater than 4 feet in height measured from the grade at the bottom of the wall to the top of the wall is defined as a structure, and no structure is permitted within the setback areas. In 2004, the developer of the landing at Moon Mountain put in roadways and several retaining walls that are greater than 4 feet in height, some of those retaining walls are on the subject lot. Those retaining walls are pre-existing, non-conforming retaining walls and are not the subject of this request. Those retaining walls are within the 15-foot west side setback area and the 15-foot rear side setback area and the 15-foot east side setback area of the subject lot. So we're not going to deal with those. There were so many retaining walls, we decided not to even deal with them as, you know, an equitable waiver. You know, we don't know what kind of shape they're in or anything. We're just gonna leave those as they are. So what Stewart's architectural firm is asking is for the ZBA to grant a variance to allow the construction of a new retaining wall within the 15-foot east side setback area. And the proposed retaining wall will exceed 4 feet in height and is therefore a structure within the land use plan ordinance and subject to the 15-foot setback as defined for the rural residential district. The retaining wall is going to vary in height up to approximately 9 feet and will be located in the front and east side setback area. So anyway, so Stewart is going to give us his presentation about the wall. You have plans in your packet and we'll look at those while he's talking to you.
Yes, well, thank you, Carol, and thank you everyone for your time. As everyone has known, we're here representing our clients, Frank and Megan Maniglia, for 4 Hayhill Road, to request a variance to place, as Carol said, a retaining wall within the setback. I don't know if you actually received color copies of the plan, but there could be a small area on the eastern setback that is shaded, which is the area in question, that we have the retaining wall within the eastern and southern setback. There are additional retaining walls on the property that are part of this development. However, they're with the setback. So those would just be, don't require any variance application. Those would follow the standard procedures for structural engineering and so on of retaining wall. As Carol indicated, this wall varies in height. Closest to Hayhill Road, it's approximately 4 feet in height, extending to where that colored area transitions through the setback to about 8 to 9 feet, where that passes through the setback line. And that wall continues on.
So do you have colored?
Yeah. The big one? Look on the top.
Right, just right.
corner. This is the
Yeah, one,
Yeah.
one area right there.
wall goes to hold.
Yeah. All right.
The
Thank
house is surrounded by a wall.
you. Yeah.
Well, there's walls everywhere.
Right, so as you know, I mean, most of the landing is very steeply sloped lots. And in order to develop these lots in a fashion that allows for placement of the house and garage with an appropriately pitched driveway, that's where most of these retaining walls come into play. Otherwise, we'd be facing some significantly steep driveways, which could potentially be a safety concern amongst other things. So, as I said, we're requesting waiver or variance from the current ordinance to allow the placement of that wall within the setback, just to cover the other basis or as part of the variance application. The criteria around the variance, granting the variance would or would not be contrary to the public interest. Granting the variance does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood in this case, which is single-family homes. So granting the variance does not threaten any health, safety, or general welfare to the public. In addition, the variance, if granted, as within the spirit of the ordinance, we believe it to be within the spirit of the ordinance because it allows for the safe development of a single-family home, which is again the intention of the whole neighborhood. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. The project is consistent again with the area's current use, and there is no gain to the public that necessarily outweighs the loss to the individual in this case. If the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. No, they certainly would not, and I think it just adds to the overall value of the landing development, allowing for more properties to be developed within that neighborhood. To the question of hardship, I would say, the denial of the variance here would render this lot extremely difficult to develop. Would be verging on undevelopable to actually make a safe and applicable driveway to get required off-street parking, as well as just access for servicing and other vehicles. So as I said, it's just that one small area within the eastern and southern setback that we're looking for it. As Carol had mentioned, and you'll see on your plan, there are other retaining walls on the northern edge that were all implemented at the time of the subdivision. A number of years ago now, and certainly predates most of the current owners within the development. Be happy to address any specific questions that you have.
I have one.
Yes,
At the corner of that lot, there's the utility boxes for the neighboring property, which are surrounded by stones.
correct,
And then your new wall would start almost right next to that.
correct.
How does that affect the drainage coming down? Because I mean, that was kind of the problem with those walls is the water coming down behind there,
Right.
the original walls. So that's my worry, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. We obviously are, so this project is under the thresholds for the requirement for stormwater management. It's currently sitting at 12,600 square feet of disturbance, which is 52.1%. So that's below the 17,000 or 55% that would trigger the requirement for stormwater management. But nonetheless, we would be addressing drainage to ensure that the infiltration is where possible kept within the lot. There is I didn't bring it with me, we didn't provide it as part of this application, but within when the land use application is submitted, there is a full set of civil engineering drawings that shows how the drainage
Okay.
will be addressed.
Alright.
Right, and then he will have the town engineer, Ray Corbin, review
We'll
it.
do all the third party
And then-
review.
You know, if there's some issue, he goes back and forth with Stuart and they make adjustments depending on if they need any. You know, but that's part of the land use permit process.
Okay, yeah, that was just my question, because they're so close to each other. But that's it, otherwise, it looks.
Stuart, how far, if I may, do you have anything to?
Yeah.
Ray, do you have any questions?
I don't, I'm quite familiar with that area. These are hard, expensive lots to develop, but almost undevelopable if we don't grant some relief. The hardship is overwhelming.
Stuart, how far into the setback does that wall go?
I don't have a hard dimension, but just graphically, it probably sitting, the very end of it sitting about 5 feet from the plot line. So it runs, the setback is 15 feet, so it runs about 10 feet into the setback.
Feet into the setback. And Carol, if I may, have we heard from any neighbors, any comments, any objections from any of the other owners up in that area in regards to this?
Everybody in their brother-in-law. Starting
I noticed.
nonsense. You know, it's, well, it's up to the homeowners association officers to notify their members, and I know that some of them are not good at it. But I did notify direct abutters, and you'll see on page 6 on the formal notice, the abutters on page 6. And so those people, I sent individual notices to. None of them have responded. And you're not hearing them, so. And you'll notice that Joe Lynch is a lot of those, but. You know, there's William and Beth Russell, Ethan and Leona Mayers, George and Judith Carter, William Wall.
Stuart, there is a house on 56. Lot 56.
56 being,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, which one is 56? Yes, there's houses on both sides of this canal.
Okay.
Going down.
Yeah. And the other one.
I certainly know, because some of the abutters are our clients. William and Beth Russell, this board already granted them a variance for a similar thing.
Nice.
So I know they're proposing to do that, and I know there has been discussion with the immediate neighbor, William Wall. He had reached out and asked for a copy of the plan, which we provided, and we haven't heard.
And
anything.
he's an existing homeowner?
Existing homeowner directly to the west.
Okay, yeah.
He's 56.
That's 56, isn't it?
56.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions, Susan? Yeah.
Nope.
Raymond? Questions or comments?
No, thank you.
All right, why don't we look at the individual questions on the worksheet? Statement of reasons, is it granted, allowed, or disallowed? All right, so the first one. Granting the variance would or would not be contrary to public interest because.
I would make a motion to accept how it's written on the application.
Mhm. I'll second.
All those in
So
And we don't
favor?
It's a
have
poll-
to,
but
we just
just poll.
polling.
Yeah,
Just- I agree.
Everybody okay with that?
yeah,
I'm okay with that.
You okay with that, Ray?
Yes, I think we ought to add a fact or two in there. And one of the reasons is, these are approved lots. And given, if you had to comply with the strict application of the set of the requirements in the ordinance, you might be able to get a phone booth on there. And it wouldn't be too useful nowadays. That said, there are other lots here with, I'd say, almost every one of them has a similar hardship. And we'll get to that later, but it's a subdivision where the public interest at this point is to continue building with the applicant knowing that there's some difficult elements of this with heights, setbacks, walls, and so forth. But I think it's in the public interest to see that this application is granted.
all right. Can you condense that into 2 words that you wanted to add there?
Were you speaking to me, Jack?
Yes.
Well, I think I can listen to his tape and
I-
add that in.
Okay, all right, so Delia's made a motion then to accept the language. Stuart, in
Yes.
the application, if you've got a copy of it there,
I do.
both words are there, would or would not. One of those should be scratched out, I assume. Is that correct, Carol?
Yeah.
Which one
So
did
it
you want
would
to?
be, rain would not be contrary to. the
Right.
public.
Okay, so
Okay.
we want to just scratch out
Yeah.
would, so would not be contrary to public interest. And Delia's made a motion of inserting the language into the worksheet that the applicant has submitted to us. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Number 2. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed because.
Okay, so then you can look at Stuart's application,
Mhm.
and I don't know if Delia is inclined to suggest using the language from that application.
I would say I agree with that. And so we're polling everyone.
Okay, Susan,
Yeah, I agree.
Raymond?
I would add that with regard to the spirit of the ordinance, the town, the selectmen, et cetera, have approved a set of standards that resulted in this layout. And therefore, these are lots that exist as legal single lots. And the spirit of the ordinance is, among other things, that they can be used. And I think the applicant has gone a long way to put some designed features onto this site that do not interfere with anything around it and are consistent with the spirit of this subdivision and the topo of this lot. And so I would say that number 2 should be granted.
All right. So
I agree.
Susan,
They're polling, yeah, everybody's agreeing.
Polling, yeah.
does somebody want to make a motion that we insert the language submitted by the applicant with Mr. Demonte's comments?
Kind of want to explain it again.
So
Sure.
Susan made that motion, Ray second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We have it. Okay, number 3. Granting the variance would or would not do
Would-
well,
Would do just-
I'm reading from the
Oh, okay.
worksheet, excuse me. Granting the variance would or would not do substantial justice because.
Well, I would move that item 3, that the granting of the variance would do substantial justice. Once again, we have an approved condominium subdivision, and its current use and the proposed use of the area is single family. The proposed use is single family. And if the conclusion of this board were that a variance should not be granted for this use, it would be basically saying that no variances should be granted for any of these condo areas. And that is not substantial justice. So I would say that substantial justice does support granting this variance.
All right, so you're saying that granting the variance, excuse me, would do substantial justice because the proposed project is consistent with the area's current use. And there's no gain to the public that outweighs the loss to the individual. Does everybody agree on that
I agree.
language? Susan,
I agree.
Raymond?
Yes,
Okay, all those in favor of inserting that language into item number 3?
I,
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Number 4, granting the variance. We turn off the lights. Oh,
Making sure we're all awake.
I hope that wasn't a comment on what we're doing.
We're just too inactive.
granting the variance would or would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties for the following reasons.
Values would not be diminished. The proposed project is consistent with the area's current use and abutting properties. Granting the variance does not block any surrounding views. In fact, it allows for further protection of the current views. The proposed use does not decrease property values. Propose we put that on the worksheet.
All right,
Okay.
Delia, Raymond, do you agree with that language?
I do. The project's current use is single-family homes. And that's exactly what we have here. It also is not going to be blocking too many views because everybody's got a view.
Right, because it sits down. I mean, when you look at the lot, you see right where the driveway has to go and where the home will sit.
Yeah.
It defines where it has to go by just looking at the ground. Yeah,
Okay.
very good point.
So I'll make a motion, then we exude the language that the applicant has submitted.
I'll
Okay,
second
so
it.
granting the variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties for the following reason. The proposed project is consistent with the area's current use and abutting properties. Granting the variance does not block any surrounding views. In fact, it allows for further protection of the current views. The proposed use does not decrease property values. Okay. Number 5. Unnecessary hardship. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because.
I could throw a word or two in here if you don't mind. If the variance was denied, this lot would probably have zero value. And that's not the intent of the whole condominium subdivision and what's already been accomplished there. So denial of the variance would absolutely be result in an unnecessary hardship to this property.
Right, there's another portion of that. There is or is not a fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property because. And the applicant has written, denial of the variance would create hardship in rendering the lot extremely difficult to develop and create a scenario whereby any development would become uncharacteristic with the abutting properties.
Fine with me.
Adopting that language,
Yeah, I
So
agree. I agree.
Raymond?
Like you said, otherwise it'd be parking.
Hey.
lots.
Right,
Yes, correct.
okay. Somebody want to make a motion to approve that?
We're just polling anyway.
Yeah.
We're just
Yeah,
all,
you're
no,
just
we're,
polling,
yeah,
and then you.
At the
make a
very end,
motion
we make a
to
motion.
adopt it.
Right,
Want to make a motion to adopt it?
what, I do.
Okay,
Go for it.
all right. Second, Susan,
Yes.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, all right. All right, let's see, moving on. The proposed use is or is not a reasonable one because the applicant has responded, the proposed use is reasonable as it is consistent with surrounding properties and within the spirit of the ordinance.
Agree.
Well, I would suggest that this condition is met. Number one, it's kind of going back to some of our prior comments, but this is a single family residential. Am I still there?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I lost everything there for a moment. This entire subdivision is a single family subdivision. So in that regard, it meets, 100% meets that requirement in that situation. And in that regard, a strict conformance would deny it, a denial in strict conformance would render it almost impossible to use. And granting the variance would not be detrimental to the area because every home that goes into this subdivision, it's going to basically have the same impact, the same characteristics, the same needs, and that to the extent that has an impact on value, it has an impact on every value of every lot if relief isn't granted by this board. So I'd say we should be granting the variance on this condition as well.
Okay, so on number 5A2, the proposed use is a reasonable one as it's consistent with surrounding properties and within the spirit of the ordinance. All
Yeah.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Okay,
Okay, you don't need B.
We don't
You've
need
already
B.
met A.
because we've already done A.
B is an order.
Any further questions or comments?
Nothing.
Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the variance as presented?
I do.
Thanks.
Second,
Second.
any comments, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Congratulations. Very good. Thank you, Dave.
I think you just need to adjourn.
Is that hearing closed?
Not yet.
I,
Oh, no, not the ZBA, but the application.
Yes.
Yes, we've granted the variance.
Right, so that is closed. I'd like to ask Carol and the rest of the board a question.
Okay.
Given the layout of this subdivision, the property topo, and all the other impacts, I personally do not see how any house can be built on any lot without requiring a variance. And they've done that regularly. I'm just wondering if there is anything we can do to lessen the applicants, and that's a big, oops, close. Am I still there? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like, to lessen up the applicant's delay and expense, because however many, there's 90, somewhere there's 120 lots, but I see that number, but
Now we lost.
You froze.
there's 75. Am I gone?
You're breaking up.
You're break.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did you get the gist of what I'm saying? Could
Are
we
you
look at some way to get more omnibus relief?
Ray, are you talking about like wholesale dispensation?
That's what I'm saying, and there is no such thing in the ordinance.
Yeah,
But
I don't-
that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I don't know how to get there.
Well, you know, I mean, as a comment from me, I think that at least they go through the process. At least the neighbors have the right to know what's going on. I mean, without us physically seeing something in front of us, I think it would be very hard to, if somebody filed a lawsuit, I think we could be held liable. Personally, the other attorney, I don't want to be one, or Carol's the attorney also. So,
Well, I think that the first thing should be looked at is to do it within the setback, and if word gets out that we've grandfathered everything, you can put the wall wherever you want, that's not a good idea, especially up there. I think everything has to be documented. Each
Yeah.
individual,
I mean,
unfortunately.
it appears, when I first started here, we were reviewing the landing because of the steepness of the lots and how tiny the lots were. And it was a paper subdivision. I don't think anybody thought about what would be required to actually build up there. And so, they didn't remove it from the acreage, the total acreage, in order to determine how many lots could fit up there. They didn't remove any of the extra steep slopes or any of the wetlands or anything. They just took the number of acres that they had divided by 15,000 square feet. And that's how many lots they made. And they didn't take into consideration any of that stuff. And so it's an unfortunate, I think, an unfortunate approved subdivision. So what's happening with Joe Lynch is that Joe Lynch is recognizing that some of those lots are unbuildable. And so he has gotten, I think, three mergers or more mergers of lots up there so that he can have more safely developed lots. But most of those lots are, for him personally, or for a friend of his, I don't know what he's doing with the other lots, but he has been looking at those lots in that way, trying to combine some of those lots so that they'll be safer to build on. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead. I would say the thought of combining lots it's almost going to force itself, given the topo of some of these small lots and the steepness of the abutting road. So I think that's going to be a good idea.
Yeah, and they have to have a survey anyway for what they're gonna do for their land use permit. So the survey requirement is already there. And I think that Jack's point about notifying the abutters. You know, people are very touchy when they're close together. The closer they are together, touchier they get. So I think that, I don't think it's a bad thing, you know, basically, maybe sets them back a month, you know, in terms of or even less than a month, because they bring the notice in. The turnaround time for the ZBA is half as fast, or twice as fast as for the planning board, so. You know, it comes in to me on a Monday, we got to put it in the newspaper by Friday that same week. It shows up in the newspaper the following week. And it only needs 5 clear days notice, so then the hearing. You know, it's really 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks at the most, for it to come and go. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I mean, I think it's unfortunate. I wish that they didn't have to, because I'd rather not do all this work for that. But I think we're kind of stuck with it.
I mean, just a couple of comments, I think, you know. I don't know if there's anything this board could do about it. But we have several we're working on that it's harder because. And I don't know what the history behind this is, but the landing actually sits within 2 different zones. It sits in mountain residential and rural residential. So in the mountain residential, we sit at 25-foot setbacks. Which makes it, I mean, these are hard enough to get the retaining walls to work. To actually get the ones with the 25-foot setbacks. I don't know how the landing ended up in 2 different zones. It's all the same development.
Well, I wasn't here at the
Right.
time, but what I was told was that it was the homeowners up there who wanted to have the 25-foot setback. And I don't think the landing had been created yet.
Okay,
It had not.
Right.
As a separate entity, so I think the homeowners came forth with a petition. To
Right.
make their setbacks 25 feet instead of 15 feet. And so it was motivated by them, wasn't
yeah,
motivated.
it's slightly odd the way it carves through. I mean, you've got literally 2 lots right next door to each other that sit in different zones. Which. Arguably, certainly, because I know we are actively working on several that are merging lots or will be merging lots. Then the other piece of it just becomes, I mean, the variance here is necessary because the ordinance defines. Anything over 4 feet is a structure. So therefore, can't place a structure in the setback. I'm not suggesting that it's changed, but I don't know if there's a different category that a retaining wall could be. I mean, it's not the building. It's still a structure. It still requires, you know, the stamp of a structural engineer because it exceeds 4 feet in height. So it's more, you know, it becomes a landscape element in many respects to make the driveways work. So I didn't know whether somewhere down the line there was a possibility of a slightly separate category for retaining walls. Because right now, the way the ordinance defines it, it defines it the same way as it defines the house itself.
Correct.
As a
Right.
primary structure.
How does the state define it? Because we adopted the state ordinance as far as the retaining walls go. And I'm not sure. Carol, do you know how the state defines the retaining wall?
I certainly know in other municipalities, you do not require. We don't require any permitting for retaining walls.
Yeah, but you also don't have dead people,
Right.
you know, all the other.
No, understood, but I mean, that's my point, that you know, you still require the structural engineering component, so still a structural engineer has to review, design. And certify that the wall was designed and constructed in compliance with all applicable code. What we're talking about is just the way on the lot the retaining wall sits.
Right.
We're not loosening the
As long as
requirements.
everything is inside the building envelope, then it doesn't bother the neighbors. It's
Right.
because it's potentially gonna bother the neighbors in that buffer that they are expecting to have surrounding their houses or their building envelopes. I mean, that's how come,
Right, but the ordinance currently has, there is an accessory structure setback. Would there be any consideration to ever saying a retaining wall would be considered an accessory structure?
you could talk to the planning board.
Therefore, it makes it a little bit easier. It's not the building. I'm not suggesting at any point you permit the building to go in the setback, but the wall itself. I mean, you could park a shed up to a certain size
Right.
within the secondary setback. Could a retaining wall be considered in the same fashion?
Well, that's a good
Right
question.
to the planning board, that's a good point. Why don't you put something and suggest, you put
Right.
something in writing?
Yeah,
And maybe come to one of the meetings and be heard.
because actually this.
This
Remind me,
is,
Cal, what's the accessory structure setback?
it's different in every zone.
Yeah.
So this one might be close to actually not requiring a variance. If,
we
Shows the
consider
fire-
if it was, if the retaining wall is considered an accessory structure and not the primary
Yeah.
structure.
Accessory structure is pretty small. I can't remember what it is, but,
The footprint of the walls was relatively small and it's this wide, although it's long, so the square footage is actually not that significant.
Didn't we just have a case, Carol, where the fire pit was considered that? Was the fire pit considered a structure?
yeah, it's in the setback.
Yeah,
It's within that buffer, so I just wanted to point out on this, the blue is the mountain residential area, so Loon backs right up to it. This is the Loon, with all the trails that come into the national forest. So this is, Beechwood 1, Beechwood 2. And then the landing is kind of, partly in and partly out. This is the landing at the end. So that's what the store's talking
Yeah,
about.
it just,
I think that was created when that land was owned by Loon. And there had been some talk of potentially putting like a mobile park down there. And so some of the homeowners,
It's a little different.
I think it was the rise, but it's a massive ride that pushed that through, right?
that's before they all made their money.
Jack, I think there was some history of that, and boy, what a nightmare, huh?
Any further business?
I just want to thank Stuart for his thoughts, because with him available to us, I thought it would be great to pick his brain, and we got a lot of good stuff. Thank you, Stuart.
you're welcome. Thank you for the time.
That'll be $10, Stuart.
Me or you?
Who charges
Which way?
more, architects or lawyers? Motion to adjourn,
I make a motion to adjourn.
second. All in favor? Opposed?
Hi,
Abstentions? Thank you all. Thank you,
thank you
Carol.
all.
Stuart.
Jack, thank you.
Thank you.
You end up reporting.
Stuart, thank you.
Bye, Ray.
You go down there.